Right, Sandra and I has kindly worked through the processes and we, in order to consider this, we're going to go back to item 5, which was extraordinary items, which I put off until the end, if you recall. And we have a motion to consider the government direction on specified development. And so this is a motion here in order for us to raise the debate. And then we will go back to item 10 and I've got 5 questions and I'll resume where we got to. So at the moment here we moved by Councillor Fletcher and seconded by Councillor Walker that the governing body consider an extraordinary item government direction on specified. The reason was not on the agenda is because a notice was only given to council yesterday. And the reason why this matter cannot be laid until a subsequent meeting is because it requires immediate action from council. And then we'll have our little chats. Then it will be referred to the planning committee, who are meeting subsequently. But at this stage here, this allows us to do it. And then at the next bit there, it'll allow the council to instruct me to let the government know that we're not entirely happy with this. And then it will be referred on to the planning committee who will report back on it later on. So we have, so I thank you all for your forbearance and for the input from Sandra and her team. So this has been moved and seconded and I'm going to put the thing straight away. This doesn't require anything. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, thank you. Well, now we're going to move to carry to item 10. There has been an update in the Councillor Fletcher's excellent start has been wordsmithed by the powers that be to request that the Mayor write to the Prime Minister and Ministers of Finance and Housing. I was going to ring them up actually, but as well. Yeah, but no, so I could put contact and I'll do it by request that they withdraw their direction to Kaingaroa to assess the Auckland Light Rail as a specified development project until the ministers have discussed this with the other Auckland Light Rail sponsors, including Auckland Council. That's very important. That's where we should have. Councillor Darby and I both agreed that it would have been most surprising under Minister Wood, Michael Wood. There's a lot of wood around here. That this would have taken in a formal process and the sponsors would have been referred. So the second was note the council disappointed the government made that decision, but they need a discussion or agreement with Auckland Council. Note that the council has not yet completed its planning and regulatory investigation of the severe weather events. Refer this matter to the Planning, Environment and Parks Committee for further consideration and report to the big. I think it's an omnibus that does the job pretty well. And so I'm happy to have that moved again by Fletcher and Walker, I believe. But beg your pardon? Sorry. Fletcher and Watson.
Watson,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I'll go back to where I was on the list of questions. So what we've done the last few minutes is just been procedural so that you'll follow through where we got to. I have Newman, Walker, Darby, Henderson, Hills in that order, and that doesn't preclude any further joining. So, Councillor Newman, please.
Okay.
Beg your pardon?
His comment.
I'm a comment, not a question.
Okay, well, okay, so,
Can we go through questions?
righto, is there any actual questions? Righto, what I'm going to do is take them in the same order and call them comments. All right? So, we're moving in the staff there anyhow. So, comments, please, starting with Councillor Newman. And who else did you rub out in the middle of all that?
Well,
Lost one.
Your Worship, I think that this is pretty atrocious behaviour from government, and I consider that this is not a proper process. I think that the timing is political because of the election and the need. Well, I think the government wishes to declare that it's doing something in this particular space. What it's doing is not good, and I think that the tactic here is to do the initial scope through Kāinga Ora with a view to Kāinga Ora at some point taking up the responsibility as a requiring authority for the notices of requirement. That's what I think will be the plan. But, Your Worship, this is quite undemocratic. Auckland Council exists under statute to fulfil its responsibilities as requiring authority too, and to undertake a planning process which is far more democratic than what has been mooted. Councillor Fletcher is right. What we had 2 days ago was a letter signed off by two ministers, not from Auckland, a minister from Wellington and a minister from Christchurch, to Mark Goshi, setting out for Kāinga Ora to undertake a process around scope. And Councillor Fletcher is right. The location and the route hasn't been decided. There has not been consultation. We have not finished our investigation regarding flooding and hazards within the catchment. And we're not talking about a minor transactional planning matter. This is 24 kilometres of some of the most complex corridor in the Auckland region from the CBD to Mangere. It's not to the airport, it's to Mangere. And by the way, the minister is wrong because it's not about rapid transport. This is about mass transport. Councillor Lee, just echoing you. Your Worship, I just want to conclude by reading from the letter that I have seen. This is from the ministers to Mark Goshi. Enabling urban development uplift associated with the case for the Auckland Light Rail project, including at least the estimated 66,000 additional households by 2050 set out in the indicative business case. That is not minor. That is way more than minor. This is arguably the biggest attempt to shoehorn a substantial planning discussion without a proper process of consultation. I feel like the government is in effect mugging Auckland and treating Auckland like mugs, and I am very disappointed in that, and I wholly endorse what has been sought here, because I think that no government of any colour should act in this way.
Very hard to disagree with any of that. Councillor Walker.
Sure. I'll just summarise first. I agree completely with Councillor Newman. This is undemocratic. In addition, it's unfair, it's unjust, it's unfunded, and it's an absolute betrayal of trust as far as Aucklanders are concerned. There are a huge number of businesses and people in homes that own their homes along this area. They will effectively have imposed on them a procedure through the Act that enables compulsory acquisition. That's what we're talking about. So for all of these businesses and people, their lives are turned upside down. Their prospect to sell their home, if they might be considering it, will be in doubt. Getting a fair price will be difficult. So we're talking about not just small numbers of people, but thousands of them, because as Councillor Newman mentioned, we're talking about 24 kilometres and then a span radiating out from that. The project is unfunded. There's an indicative business case, frankly, that doesn't amount to anything much at all, and it is continuously blowing out. And there is absolutely no certainty that this project will ever materialise. I would suggest that there are many changes afoot that will ensure that it does not, and there are much more effective ways of moving people along this corridor and around Auckland. So we should be opposing this. There is urgency to this, and I commend Councillor Fletcher for bringing it up. I'm disappointed that we even need to refer this to the Planning Committee, because we've got the power in this committee. We've got the people assembled around here, And certainly it requires urgent action on the Mayor's part. And I would hope a huge amount of publicity, because it is one of the biggest things that a particular government is foisting on Auckland. So I repeat again, it's undemocratic, it's unfair, it's unjust, it's unfunded, and it's a betrayal of process.
And unwise. Councillor Darby.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just to reiterate what the Mayor said, for the benefit of members, Mayor and I are sponsors, and to let you know that we have until late Monday. Neither of us had wind of this at all. And there has been the opportunity at the Auckland Light Rail sponsors meeting. The Minister of Housing and Urban Development is a member, is a co-sponsor, along with the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Transport former. We haven't seen the new Minister of Transport. So just to let you know that. I found out on Monday afternoon an email came in, but to be honest, I didn't really get to catch up with reading all that particular email until the Tuesday. I let Councillor Hills know yesterday, and Councillor Dalton know of what was being suggested there. There was absolutely no mention of it at the Auckland Light Rail sponsors meeting, as I said. I don't think this would have progressed the same way. Maybe if Minister Michael Wood was still at the helm of the Auckland Light Rail sponsors group, because his approach is, it really is genuinely embracing. And I think the Mayor and I have been pretty impressed with how former Minister did operate there and take into account our views and our suggested directions, like the re-examination of the surface option. But look, ministers operate differently. It is a little bit reminiscent of how the MPSUD was dropped in on us. And some, Councillor Hills, I think you used to be party to the group discussions of the former Mayor, myself, yourself, and some others with relevant ministers, and the Minister of Housing and Urban Development was part of that group as well, yet the MPSUD was dropped in on us and not mentioned at a meeting that occurred 2 weeks prior, 2 or 3 weeks prior. But look, that's the prerogative of ministers. They have to wear it as well. But all said, we should not be surprised that there does need to be a concerted effort and response to the urban transformation along this route. Now, Mayor, I respectfully disagree with you that the Auckland Light Rail project is a transport project. One of the things that I've always brought to the Auckland Light Rail discussion is that it's got to be more than that. And for the first time in New Zealand's history, the Auckland Light Rail project is being viewed as an urban transformation project. It's transforming mobility and it's also transforming living. And we should be doing that all the time when we approach transport, not in isolation. But look, that's a small thing aside. That's how I've been approaching this project, and something that, the impetus that I've been bringing to the project at the Auckland Light Rail Group. We have carved this section out of the Plane Change 78 response. There was further work due. Now, this proposal of an STP is one vehicle, one approach to doing that work. Now, we might disagree with that. I've just had a conversation, and Mayor, you had a conversation earlier with Vui Mark Gaucher, who's the chair of Kāinga Ora, and he wants to see this as an all-embracing approach, if it is to progress, between Auckland Council and Aucklanders and Kāinga Ora and MHUD, which his organisation is acting on behalf of. My understanding is they've been given a year to just assess it. So this is not, all guns blazing out of the blocks and go. There is an assessment process. This Urban Development Act from 2020 has only, I think, been used 4 times. And I think only one in Auckland, and that was the Winton application in Ardmore, in a very damp part of town. And that was struck out. I think there's one in Porirua, and I think there's one that's got over the line in Tauranga as well. there's been some criticism that government hasn't used the legislation. Now it is, it's getting criticised from us. But of course, that's on the notification to us. So I think there is some merit possibly in this, but we will only understand that if we enter the assessment process. I have a hunch that it is unlikely that the Minister will withdraw this at this time. But we can say that it should have been raised at the Auckland Light Rail sponsors meeting. But look, you know, it's good for us to provide this feedback, and that is my feedback. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you for that. Actually, it's not the first time a major event has been, a transport or program has had huge urban impact. The Harbour Bridge, actually, you might have noticed, when that was put in, suddenly we had suburbs over the shore. So there you go. Mike Lee, who has a...
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I fully support the recommendations and I endorse the comments of colleagues, though I must take issue with some of the statements made by Councillor Darby. When I hear words like transformation because of a certain mode down a certain route, I feel that one should beware. We need to deal with transport and housing development in a technical manner, not in terms of political hyperbole, transformation and so on. Just to look back where we've come from in the 2015-2025 Auckland Transport proposed a light rail system for Auckland. It was as an analogue for buses on arterials, which were predicted sometime in the 2020s to become so congested that everything would start to come to a halt and that you would get excessive bus transport, which rather than helping would hinder. And so light rail was considered by transport planners to be the answer, and it was based on similar projects in Australia, but essentially it was to go from the Wynyard Quarter up Queen Street, up Simon Street, to Sandringham Road, Dominion Road, Mount Eden Road, and Manukau Road. At some stage it got changed, transformed perhaps, to a single line down Dominion Road to Auckland International Airport, which was suboptimal for airport travel and suboptimal for PT because there would be way less tram stops than there were present bus stops. However, the idea of urban development came in the time of Minister Twyford. So this is not the first we've heard of it. And essentially the council more or less has gone along with it, and I think that's been a mistake. The harmful thing is, apart from the $60 million plus that has been wasted so far without 1 centimetre of track being laid, is that it actually has stymied and wrecked previous plans for light rail, sensible light rail in Auckland, albeit those plans were not funded. But there was also another plan which was sabotaged, and that was for post-CRL, a heavy rail connection from the main trunk line to Auckland International Airport. That's the real harm that this has done, not the profligacy or the waste, but the lost opportunities. The other concern I have is the technical ignorance that you hear at all levels of government. Waka Kotahi, perhaps the worst now, equating light rail with rapid transit. Anyone who knows anything about light rail knows that that is not rapid transit. The average speed of light rail in Australia is 30 kilometres per hour. That's AT's safe speed. That's what they reduce cars to be safe. So, Mr Mayor, I agree with that, but I think there needs to be a more fundamental addressing of this whole project, a technical assessment of this project, because this is not a place for political hyperbole or transformation. That belongs to stage magic shows and alchemy. What we want is technical competence and technical clarity. We have transport problems, we have housing problems, we need to deal with them in a competent way, and we need to deal with them at some pace. Presently, we're doing neither, and that needs to change. Thank you.
Well, that's transformational. He set a high standard for you, Councillor Henderson.
Yes, well, I apologise in advance for not meeting it then, Mayor. Look, I will be supporting this, but it is with a bit of a heavy heart. Because, look, I don't want my vote today to be construed as being anti-housing or anti-urban development. These are exactly the kind of places where we should be developing housing, exactly the kind of places where we need to encourage more and more people to live, next to jobs, next to their study opportunities, right down the road from great public transport, even with or without the light rail corridor in some places. So I do commend the updated wording, because despite all of my misgivings, look, I think we do need to have our democratic say on this issue. You know, Auckland Council is a democratic body that represents the people of Auckland. I don't agree with what Auckland Council says about this kind of stuff a lot, but I think it's our right to say it, and it's our right for me to make those arguments and be on the wrong side of votes over and over again on the issue, but that is the way it goes. It should be going to the planning committee, so let's do that. Look, just while I have the floor, for completeness, I should point out, I'm really at pains. I don't want for my vote to be construed as anti-housing, because, you know, the city for too long has shut out families with fair access to housing on transport routes and on the isthmus. We've been locking people out for so long, for decades. It's time that we recommit to a smart, compact city. It's the kind of stuff that we don't talk about a lot in these debates, unfortunately. I agree with the comments that this is an urban development project as well as a transport one, but I think that's good. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for this to be a housing project as well as a transport one. We've constrained housing for far too long. I want council to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. But we need to be at the table for that to happen. So I'll vote it through.
Thank you. I think you got the point. It's about not being part of the not being at the table is why we're angry most of all. Okay, Councillor Hills, the leader of our planning committee.
Kia ora, Mayor, thank you. And first of all, I just want to give an apology to Independent Māori Statutory Board members, Tauhina Rei and Chair Taipiri, a member of the community who's had to leave, and some others, the staff who've been waiting in the corridors. I would prefer in the future, this is the second time a governing body meeting has happened before a planning meeting, and we've got really important items on that agenda, and we're now halfway through the day, and I just hope that we can not allow that to happen again.
I'll speak to the ministers and tell them, please don't send us stuff out the night before.
Yeah, I don't need to be interrupted. I'm talking just generally about the length of the meeting, which has now gone into, so it's twice. So just if we can avoid that in the future, especially for people like the Independent Māori Statutory Board members who are waiting. When I heard about this, and disappointingly, as Councillor Fletcher heard of this, was yesterday. Spoke to Megan while I was on the bus home, pretty shocked about it. And thanks to Councillor Darby for sending me the full details yesterday evening. This is a very concerning approach. It may be, we may find out, it could be the right approach, but as Councillor Henderson was saying, it could be, but we haven't been asked, we haven't been spoken to. It feels like this has been protected or hidden from our staff, our officials who are working in their best intentions on a plan change for this route. We have supported light rail, we've supported the direction, we've supported the fact this is an urban development project. We all know that, we discussed that last year, many years now. It has dragged out for a very long time, and I just wish that it had started. But I guess the issue here is that this is not the way to do things, this is not partnership. This is, as Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Ferry will be attending I think it's the third meeting that Councillor Ferry, Margie Watson and others have organised to speak to residents about the floods. People are already feeling a lack of certainty around many things in our city, and this is a very unfair approach to be surprised, not asked, not even consulted with. We don't know if all the work we've been doing on the plan change for this area is that wasted? What does that do to Plan Change 78? There's all those questions, and thank you to Councillor Fletcher for slightly tweaking the resolutions. I was planning to get Megan to bring this at the beginning of our committee, but it will come back. So just want to acknowledge that this is not the right approach. This is not me having comments on whether there should be housing and transport here, because that's two of our main roles in the city, is to provide for and improve our city's transport and housing situation, and maybe that is what the government is trying to do here, but they didn't ask, and they didn't ask for advice, and they haven't even talked to our officials, and with yourself and Councillor Darby and others as a part of the the light rail group, that would clearly be a place that this would have been brought up, and I think it's extremely disappointing that we're now having to debate and waste a lot of time talking about something that if an honest conversation was happened a lot earlier, we wouldn't be doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to note we haven't received any advice on this yet, which I think is part of the problem. And as a result, I'm happy with this wording. I feel like that reflects what the probably unanimous concern around the table is, that it is about leaving us out of something that is our city and our people and our role. And I share the concerns that have been raised about that. What I don't necessarily share, and I think is not necessarily a universal view around the table, is concern specifically about the idea that this might happen. As has already been outlined by some of my colleagues, this is potentially an assessment. They should definitely talk to us before they trigger an assessment. But I'm not scared of the assessment itself. I'm also not particularly worried about Kāinga Ora, having had some really positive experiences with developments in the Roscoe development area, where they have over time learned, as a result often from a lot of input from the community and the local board, and improved their approach over time. I live in the third of 5 neighbourhoods that they're developing, and they are literally taking houses out past my house in the middle of the night at the moment, so I have pretty first-hand experience of it across the road. And they definitely have improved and have become a lot more community focused. Also, I'm really concerned that there's a lot of misnomers out there about the kind of people who live in Kāinga Ora housing. And actually, this is more about planning. This is not actually necessarily about them building a lot of housing. They don't necessarily actually own a lot of land in these areas. So, but my experience of living in a neighbourhood with lots of Kāinga Ora housing has been great. The local school is, the primary school is decile 2. And that reflects the incomes of the area, which are varying, and my kids get to go to school with other kids, experience other families and cultures and levels of income and all of that kind of stuff, which I personally think is really rich and enhances their well-being and enhances our community connection. So I would just like to put a shout out there for those who are scared of Kāinga Ora, either as a developer or as a I guess a neighbour. I've had a pretty good experience. That's not universal, and they do need to get better, but they have been getting better, and we can work with them to help that happen. I'm also a little bit concerned about the carving off of this into transport only. I guess I think about Britomart, which could have very much been seen solely as a transport project, but actually has been the trigger to revitalise what was a really grotty part of our city. To the point where it's now actually a really lovely place to be. It has a market on Saturdays. There are now upmarket hotels there, as well as the transport function. There's high-end retail. There's starting to be apartments built. It has had a transformational impact on that area, as well as serving a transport function for the city. And I think that's an opportunity that the light rail corridor project also has. I would, though, having said some nice things about Kāinga Ora, like to raise a bit of concern about the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. I know that the Albert Eden Local Board has been having really difficult conversations about the Wairaka precinct and the development there, and I would be concerned that this process might recreate some of the problems there. MHUD has, in that context, operated somewhat as a barrier between the local board and the community and the actual developers. and that needs to be addressed in this process if they're going to be one of the players. They have to be a facilitator, an enabler, and a connector, not sort of basically a barrier. So I will support this. I want us to get on with the conversation. I want us to get this collaboration back on track, if you'll allow the pun. And so I will be voting for this and thank my colleagues for raising the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fully, please.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. I won't labour the point because I really am just tautokoing what's already been said by Councillors Darby, Hills, Henderson and Councillor Ferry, and just noting, as our staff said, that this is only the first step in a long process and it's the investigation step, and no outcomes or decisions have been made or will be made until July 2024. And like Councillor Ferry, I am not afraid of the assessment or the investigation, and in fact I welcome it. But I do also agree with the points that you've raised, that this is really about us not being at the table, and that is somewhat disrespectful of our position and of us as elected governing body or the governors of the city. And so I will be voting in support of it as well. Kia ora.
Okay, that's everybody.
A right of reply.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right of reply, that was everybody's questions. I was just going to ask you, would you want a right of reply? But
Thank you. Your Worship, I really want to thank my colleagues for giving us the opportunity for the consideration of this. And in doing so, this ought not to be a discussion about urban planning or transport. It isn't around the merits or otherwise of Kāinga Ora or the residents. This is simply about process. And it's process on a community that is already traumatised and looking for certainty. So, you know, I thought about it this week. We remembered that it's 50 years since the French dropped those bombs, the nuclear bombs on Mururoa. As far as I'm concerned, this is the equivalent for me of the government dropping a bloody nuclear bomb on Auckland. It's a process thing for me, that this is just going too far, that there was not the opportunity for any dialogue. Others might have known on Monday. I only found out about this through a member of the community yesterday, and I do not appreciate it, because I, along with Councillor Ferry, have to face up to a community that have no certainty. There was one person on Tuesday night, a Mr. Abbott, who wouldn't mind me talking about him, with his 3 small children. They have been moved to 6 different Airbnbs. They're still trying to keep their children enrolled at school. They've spent money on a property that potentially might now, in terms of categorisation, they've taken the insurance money, they're trying to get on with their lives. These people are traumatised, and this is just not the right time. It's totally tone deaf in terms of the empathy and the understanding that we need to give to those who have been impacted by floods. So I'm sorry if I feel a little extreme about this. This is simply to say, please, Mr. Mayor, could you inform the government ministers and the Prime Minister that we expect a better level of collaboration for the future, particularly on behalf of our communities, which are really hurting at the moment, and it's just not fair. Thank you.
Mayor, I think we do need to withdraw the bombing anecdote. It's just not appropriate. It's like, think of Ukraine. I've actually probably the only person in the room that's been within 30 metres of a bomb going off. And I can tell you it's not a bomb going off today. It's not. They're going off in Ukraine. They went off in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Let's leave it there, please.
there was an element of hyperbole that crept in there, you'd have to say, a transformational element of hyperbole.
In terms of metaphors, I do seem to get myself into trouble from time to time. But I can correct Councillor Darby. I was outside Green Park Station when a bomb did go off, and I was only metres from it. So I do understand the impact of bodies blowing up and matters of that kind. But if it offends you, I withdraw it. But as far as I'm concerned, the behaviour of the government on dropping this on us is completely unacceptable.
Okay, I think we've got that. Thank you very much. We won't let it try and turn this into a competition to be near a bomb. But I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour of this, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, carried. Thank you very much. I think we're now in a position to call the meeting to a close, and I'll ask Richard if he wants a short break before he starts.
Because this has gone on, we will go to a half an hour lunch break, so we'll be back at 1:20. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, for your attention, everybody. Cheers.